For most people, the financial world feels like a series of sudden shocks, market crashes, interest rate hikes, inflation spikes. But those who study the deeper currents of history know something different. Global money doesn't move in straight lines. It moves in cycles, long and slow, rising and falling like tides on the edge of an empire. And throughout the last 5 centuries, only 6 currencies have managed to climb all the way to the top and claim the title of global reserve. Here's the detail almost no one pays attention to. The average reign of a reserve currency is about 94 years. A number that should make every American sit forward, because the US dollar has been the world's anchor since 1944. By historical standards, we are not early in the cycle, we are late. But reserve currencies don't simply age and wither away. They're displaced by the same predictable mechanism every time, a pattern strong enough to trace back to a quiet hotel ballroom in New Hampshire. Every empire once believed its currency would last forever. The Spanish real, the Dutch guilder, the French franc, each dominated global trade in its era. Yet none were destroyed by armies or revolutions. They fell because the underlying financial pattern always plays out the same way, unfolding in a series of stages. And if you know how to read those stages, a troubling fact emerges. The US dollar is following the exact same script today. To understand how this cycle begins, we need to travel back to July 1, 1944. While American troops pushed through Normandy, another strategic battle was taking place in the Mount Washington Hotel at Bretton Woods. No smoke, no artillery. Just 730 delegates from 44 allied nations negotiating the blueprint of the post-war financial world. Britain arrived trying desperately to preserve the pound, the global reserve since Napoleon's defeat. Their champion was the brilliant John Maynard Keynes, but even genius has its limits when standing across from a nation holding 2/3 of the world's gold. The American delegation, led by Harry Dexter White, didn't come to compromise. They came with leverage. They came with gold. What unfolded wasn't a negotiation so much as a carefully managed transition of power, one that had been set in motion decades earlier as Britain moved through the classic currency cycle. Phase 1, hard money. A currency fully backed by something tangible. For Britain that meant gold. Before World War I, £1 equaled $4.86, a number so sacred it symbolized the reliability of the world's most powerful empire. Phase 2, paper promises. Gold becomes paper claims. The public believes they can redeem those notes for metal at any time, and because the belief holds, the system works. During the 19th century, sterling thrived. It financed railways, powered factories, and bankrolled the Industrial Revolution. Phase 3, debt expansion. This is where every empire stumbles. Global trade expands faster than gold reserves, so the world needs more of your currency than you can honestly back. Wars accelerate the imbalance. By the outbreak of World War I, Britain was printing far more claims than its gold supply could support. Weeks after the fighting began, the gold standard was suspended. It was temporary, they insisted. It never returned. By the time World War I ended, Britain was drowning in debt. Their attempt to restore the gold standard in 1925 was a last-ditch effort to rebuild faith, but the math no longer worked. When global markets realized Britain could not honor its promises, confidence evaporated. In 1931, facing a run on its reserves, Britain abandoned gold permanently. The pound collapsed 30% in months, signaling the end of an era, long before the world officially acknowledged it. During World War II, Britain relied heavily on American ships, weapons, fuel, and food. Roosevelt's Lend-Lease program looked generous at first glance, but the bill was very real. By 1945, Britain owed the United States billions, the modern equivalent of nearly $70 billion. With its cities shattered, its treasury empty, and its gold shipped to America, Britain entered Bretton Woods as a fading empire. Keynes arrived with one final proposal, a new supranational currency called the Bancor, designed to prevent any nation from dominating the global financial system. Elegant, logical, balanced, the Americans rejected it instantly. Harry Dexter White unveiled the new order instead. The US dollar, backed by gold at $35 an ounce, would sit at the center of global trade. Every other currency would peg itself to the dollar. It was the passing of an invisible crown. Britain understood exactly what it meant. They signed because they had no alternative. On July 22, 1944, the era of American monetary supremacy began. But here's the unsettling truth. Britain didn't lose the reserve currency because it wanted to. It lost it because it followed the same cycle every empire travels: hard money to paper claims to debt explosion to collapse. And today the dollar is deep into that same process. The US inherited something no nation had ever possessed at such scale: the exorbitant privilege. France coined the term not kindly. When your currency is the global reserve, you can print money to buy real goods from other nations. Others must work, mine, manufacture, and ship to earn dollars. America can create them with a keystroke. But hidden inside this privilege was a built-in flaw known as the Triffin dilemma. Robert Triffin warned Congress in 1959 that to supply enough dollars to the world, the US would need to run permanent trade deficits. But those deficits would slowly weaken confidence in the dollar's gold backing. As more dollars accumulated overseas, foreign governments began asking an uncomfortable question: does America still have enough gold to honor its promise? At first, everything looked fine. The US was booming. But beneath the surface the math was turning. Foreign central banks were stacking dollars, and some quietly began redeeming them for gold. The reserves at Fort Knox started slipping, slowly at first, then faster. By the mid-1960s, France made its move. President Charles de Gaulle announced he would exchange French dollar reserves for gold at every opportunity. French warships sailed to New York to collect the bars. Spain joined. Switzerland increased its redemptions. Germany hesitated but watched closely. A global bank run was forming in slow motion. Between 1965 and 1971, US gold reserves collapsed by nearly half. At that pace, America would run out entirely within a decade. Meanwhile, hundreds of billions of dollars sat overseas, all technically redeemable for gold. President Richard Nixon faced a brutal choice. Leave the gold window open and watch America's reserves vanish, or close it and pray the world wouldn't abandon the dollar altogether. On August 15, 1971, Americans tuned into their televisions expecting routine political talk. Instead, President Richard Nixon delivered a decision that would permanently reshape the global monetary world. With steady confidence, he declared that the United States would temporarily suspend dollar convertibility into gold. He blamed currency speculators, reassured the public that the dollar would stay strong, and promised the change wouldn't last long. That temporary measure is now more than 50 years old. Almost immediately, the dollar dropped sharply against major currencies. Foreign governments were furious. They had accumulated dollars because those dollars were supposed to be backed by gold. Now their reserves were nothing more than paper supported by American promises. With one announcement, the Bretton Woods system died. We moved from phase 2 to phase 3 in an instant. And yet, the astonishing twist is this: the dollar did not collapse. By all historical logic, the US should have lost its reserve currency status right there. Instead, the dollar survived and even strengthened in the decades that followed. Oh. Because the United States executed one of the greatest geopolitical strategies of the 20th century, far from Wall Street, far from Washington, deep in the deserts of Saudi Arabia. In July 1974, U.S. Treasury Secretary William Simon boarded a classified flight to Jeddah with an urgent objective. The recent oil crisis had crushed Western economies. Meanwhile, Arab nations were overflowing with oil revenue, and their growing influence threatened the dollar's already fragile position. If they decided to price oil in another currency, America's financial dominance could crumble overnight. Simon met privately with Saudi Crown Prince Fahd and proposed a bold arrangement. The United States would buy Saudi oil, guarantee the kingdom's security, and supply advanced American weapons. In return, Saudi Arabia had to commit to two crucial conditions. First, all Saudi oil would be priced exclusively in US dollars. Second, Saudi Arabia would recycle its huge oil profits into US Treasury bonds, sending those dollars right back into the American financial system. The Saudis agreed, and soon the rest of OPEC followed. With that, any nation needing oil needed dollars first. Japan needed dollars. Germany needed dollars. India, Brazil, South Korea, all of them required a constant supply of American currency to keep their economies running. The US had replaced gold backing with oil backing, creating the Petrodollar system. The brilliance of this arrangement was undeniable. Foreign exporters who earned dollars couldn't use them locally, so they reinvested them into US treasuries. That kept American interest rates low and allowed the US to run massive trade deficits without consequence. America printed money, bought imports, and then received those same dollars back as foreign investment. A self-reinforcing loop was born. This feedback cycle financed both America's global military reach and its domestic lifestyle. The US built bases around the world, fought expensive wars, expanded suburbs, and funded technological dominance, all while the world paid for it through their dependence on the dollar. But this privilege came with a hidden cost. The system encouraged endless debt creation. Every decade, the number of dollars circulating overseas grew faster than America's real economic output. The same mathematical forces that once crushed the British Empire began to gather against the US. The breaking point arrived on February 28, 2022. While news headlines focused on the war in Ukraine, central banks around the world witnessed something far more consequential. The United States and the European Union froze roughly $300 billion of Russia's central bank reserves, money accumulated over decades through legitimate trade. In a single weekend, those reserves were effectively erased. And in that moment, finance ministers in China, India, Brazil, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey asked the same haunting question. If political disagreements can erase our reserves, is the dollar truly safe? This was the start of Phase 5 when global trust fractures. Within months, new trade arrangements bypassing the dollar appeared everywhere. China and Brazil settled trade directly in yuan and reals. India bought Russian oil in rupees. Saudi Arabia openly explored accepting yuan for energy. Then central banks began buying gold at record levels, over 1,100 tons in 2022, the highest annual purchase since the late 1960s. China, Poland, Singapore, Turkey, and many others piled into gold, quietly preparing for a world where the dollar was no longer the unquestioned anchor. Meanwhile, America's debt entered a new and dangerous territory. The national debt soared above $35 trillion. More alarming was the cost of servicing that debt. In 2024, interest payments alone crossed $1 trillion, more than the US spends on defense or Medicare. The trend is accelerating, and projections show the annual interest bill could reach $2 trillion within a decade. Raising taxes won't fix it. Cutting spending is politically impossible. Printing money risks triggering inflation. The US is now trapped in the same debt spiral that once suffocated Britain, the exact mechanism that pushes reserve currencies from Phase 5 into Phase 6. This isn't the end of America. The dollar won't disappear. But the world is gradually moving toward a multipolar monetary order, where the dollar is one major currency among several, not the unquestioned ruler. And that shift, slow, subtle but unstoppable, is the essence of Phase 7. Phase 7 is the moment every reserve currency eventually reaches, the point where a new system quietly takes the throne. It never happens in a single dramatic announcement. There is no day the dollar died. Instead, it unfolds gradually, like a tide pulling back from the shore. And right now, we are watching the architecture of that replacement being built piece by piece. The world isn't looking for a single new hegemon. No nation today has the scale, trust, or geopolitical stability to replace the dollar one-to-one. Instead, Phase 7 marks the transition to a multipolar monetary order, where power is distributed rather than concentrated. In practical terms, this means global trade will be settled not in one currency, but in several, each backed by different alliances, commodities, or digital systems. We already see the outlines. The BRICS bloc is expanding and experimenting with commodity-linked settlement mechanisms. China is accelerating the use of the digital yuan in cross-border trade. The EU is working on deeper financial integration to strengthen the euro's resilience. Even Middle Eastern energy exporters are negotiating long-term contracts in mixed currency baskets rather than dollars alone. None of these are symbolic gestures, they are foundation stones of the next system. Phase 7 doesn't require the dollar to vanish. It simply requires its share of global settlement to fall far enough that the world no longer depends on it. When multiple alternative rails exist, regional currencies, gold-linked instruments, digital settlement networks, the dollar loses the structural privilege it held for nearly 8 decades. And once that privilege fades, the US must compete like every other nation, rather than commanding the system by default. For individuals, the implications are profound. Wealth preservation will increasingly depend on diversification across currencies, commodities, and jurisdictions. Nations that adapt early to the new rules will gain influence. Those that cling to the old order will watch their leverage erode. Phase 7 is not collapse. It is transition, a reshaping of the monetary world to reflect the geopolitical realities of the 21st century. The question is no longer whether the system will change. It's whether you change with it.